Oh, I'm starting today. Welcome, everybody, to the Less is More Sports Talk podcast. Les is feeling a little under the weather, but he's toughing it out and being a part of our cap or no cap college basketball edition. Ryan could not be here today, but don't worry, he's contributing to the show in ways that will allegedly anger and frustrate me, but I doubt that will happen. But as I mentioned before, this is our annual cap or no cap college basketball edition show, which is basically follows the format of I or Les, I don't know how we're going to do that yet, will propose a question, and Les and I will tell you whether it's cap, meaning a bold faced lie, or no cap, meaning the truth. And I will always have a funny hat ready. Well, not a funny hat. I will always have a hat ready to go. So don't pay attention to whether or not I'm wearing a cap. I made a sign that says no cap or cap because I just want to show off all the hats I have. So deal with it, people. But anyway, we're going to have a fun show today. This is always one of the most watched and most interesting shows of the year. So without further ado, Les, am I going to kick it over to you or do you want me to ask the first question we're starting off with?
Well, you are technically leading the show, so you can do it however you want, however your little heart desires.
All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and start with our first question, which seems to be the question on everybody's mind, which is cap or no cap, UConn three-peat is in the bag. Will UConn three-peat? Les, is this cap or no cap?
Well, I'm going to start by capping this because don't get me wrong, UConn has been very good these last several years under Danny Hurley. He's a phenomenal coach, and they had a good offseason. They brought in some good players to the portal. I know what a lot of UConn fans are going to say when they tune into this podcast because I'm going to first point out that how big of a deal I think losing Tristan Newton is to their chances of three-peating. And where this comes into what UConn fans are going to say, UConn fans can make the argument that they lost a lot from their first championship to their second championship. But in my personal opinion, Tristan Newton was the engine that made that team go on both championship teams. Um, it's going to be very hard to replace that. It's going to be very hard to find that guy who kind of holds everybody together and gets the best out of his teammates. Maybe somebody will step up, but I'm not going to bet my bottom dollar on it. And then the big one why I don't think they're going to three-peat is that looking at their roster, I see a lot of potential holes in their perimeter defense. Look, it's a perimeter game in basketball nowadays. There's certain defenses on defending the three-point line that you can't get away with nowadays that you maybe could in years past. And I see a lot of holes on that UConn team. So if I had to, bet my bottom dollar on who's going to win the national championship this year, it's not going to be UConn. I think there's several teams at the top that I think could win it. Kansas looks really good. Arkansas looks really good. Alabama looks really good. And keep in mind, I say really good on paper. And to avoid the podcast jinx that I subjected myself to last year, I am going to avoid talking about how good I think Duke basketball could be this year. But overall, this is capped.
Always solid pick, yes. Unless we're going to have a very boring start to the show because I agree that that is cap. And I'm putting on my Reds hat because that's the only team that's ever had close to a dynasty that I actually root for. And I mean, it's for all the reasons you said, basically. I mean, they're going to be talented. UConn always be talented. They have the best coach in the country. But I think they're going to have at times a little bit of an identity crisis this year. Of course, they had a good offseason. They bring in Aiden Mahaney and they bring in Liam McNeely, or not McNeely. I can't remember that kid's name since he left IU, but they brought in some good players. But like you said, their
I mean,
perimeter.
it is Liam McNeely.
Oh, I nailed it. Cool. They do
Yeah,
have
it
a
is
lot
Liam
of
McNeely.
but they do have a lot of questions on that perimeter defense. You lose Tristan Newton and you lose Donovan Clingham, who was able to go toe to toe with Zach Edey last year. I do think UConn is going to have a fairly deep run. Don't get me wrong. I'm not like, oh, yeah, this is like when North Carolina didn't make the tournament after being in the final game. They're going to make the tournament. I think they're a Sweet 16 team this year. I just don't think this year, every dynasty has that one year where they don't win it. The Patriots didn't win it every year, and the Bulls didn't win it every year. So I think this is UConn's off year, where the best they're hoping for is a Big East championship, which is a tough ass conference. Let's not forget, especially when you're trying to break in a new mantra, a new mindset, a new group of players, and like you said, there are a lot of really good teams and sneaky good teams hiding around every corner this season, it feels like. So I am going to cap that. And Ryan does agree with us. Ryan says UConn will make a deep run in the tournament, but another team will be able to rise to the top of college basketball this season. And we've already talked about who those teams might be. So it's a unanimous three capper for UConn being a three-peat champion, which means congratulations, UConn, on your third straight championship. Enjoy. Go and go Stores. But yeah, that's three caps in a row to start off the show. But now it's time to bring on our next question, which is blah, 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 blah. Conference realignment made the Big 12 better. Is this cap or no cap less?
I want to start by saying that, I mean, it's no secret to anybody who follows college basketball that the Big 12 has been viewed as the best conference the last several years. And I am going to continue that trend and say no cap. But I also want to say that it also made other conferences better as well. You add Texas and Oklahoma to the Big 12, you add Oregon and UCLA to the Big 10. So overall, conference realignments have made other conferences better too, if we're sticking within the Power Four model at least.
Yeah.
Yes. But yeah, I mean, the Big 12, they have, I think, 4 teams in the top 10, I believe, for to start this preseason poll, which, as we all know on this podcast, the preseason poll don't mean a hill of beans, but it is a great place to start. And yeah, the top end of that Big 12 conference is going to be absolutely loaded. Kansas is going to look like one of the best teams in the country this year. Iowa State's in the top 10. I really like Baylor too, because I love their backcourt. Shout out to Captain Roach on that one, former Blue Devil. And that young kid they got, VJ Edgecombe, bro, he's a baller. I don't know if you haven't watched him in high school, check out what he did during the Olympics, representing the Bahamas. Led him in scoring, 20 points a game. Baylor's going to be a fun team to watch, and many others among the top of that Big 12 are going to be a ton of fun. So yeah, that's no cap for me, but I also want to point out that a lot of conferences benefited from the conference realignment.
Especially in basketball.
Yes.
I am putting on my truck stop conference hat because I have my Bucky's hat, but this is no cap whatsoever. And the amazing thing about it is the Big 12 was already deep enough without adding any of these teams. And personally, the only two of these teams that I think are going to make noise at the level we think they are Arizona, of course. They're an established power by this point. Tommy Lloyd's got a machine down there. But also surprisingly, Arizona State. We talked about our first Hurley. Now it's time to talk about our second Hurley. They have a sneaky good team down there in Tempe, Arizona, with those Sun Devils. I mean, they got Jaden Quittens, which we all thought was going to be a move for Louisville. They add Bashir Jihad into that great lineup. They are a surprisingly sneaky team I'd like to watch. But other than that, it's a lot of the usual suspects. Like you said, West Virginia adds in Tucker DeVries, and Javon Small. You've got Kansas, who's very loaded. UCF, another sneaky good team, doesn't really have like a superstar that everyone knows at this point, but they're going to get there. And they added Benny Williams and Keyshawn Hall. They're going to be good. So yeah, the Big 12 really didn't even need to add any of these teams like Utah, Colorado. Their season was last season. They're kind of grasping at straws right now term when it comes to figuring out how their roster is going to be constructed. But I mean, you've got Kansas, Kansas State, Cincinnati, Arizona, Arizona State, like I mentioned. There are a lot of good players and a very deep conference in the Big 12. And we both neglected to mention Houston, who looked like they were going to win the national championship at various points last season. Still have Kelvin Sampson and still going strong. So this is a no cap whatsoever. The Big 12 is the best conference top to bottom this year, but it's not the most interesting. We're going to get to that one here in a second. And as for Ryan's take, he agrees it's another unanimous decision that it's no cap. Even with Texas and Oklahoma leaving the conference, the Big 12 got better, and it'll be hard to compete with some of the Western teams like we mentioned. So, I hinted that the Big 12 was the best conference, but not the most interesting conference. Which brings us to our third question of the day, which is going to segue into my answer, which is IU wins the Big Ten. Les, is that cap or no cap?
I'm not going to lie, man. I want to so bad. I think IU is one of those teams that college basketball is better when they're good, but I can't do it. It's cap to me. I still think Purdue is the team to beat in that conference. Their backcourt's back. Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer return, which I don't know if you've seen. Braden Smith is a first-team All-American in the preseason poll right there, so shout out to him. Trey Kaufman-Renn is expected to take that next step this season, according to head coach Matt Painter. As far as replacing the size of someone like Zach Edey. They bring in freshman Daniel Jacobson after Edey went pro. Um, Purdue won't look the same post Edey as far as how they play. I think they're going to space the floor and run a little bit better, but I still think they are the best team on paper when it comes to the Big Ten, and I think that playing differently post Edey isn't going to necessarily be a bad thing. I think they're going to be able to play quicker, and I think it's going to be even more up to speed to how the rest of basketball is played. So that is cap to me.
Now I know what you're thinking. I'm putting on the Indiana hat, but I actually
Yeah.
agree here. I think this is cap. I will preface this by saying that I think Indiana has the most talented roster in the Big Ten. But the question is, you're bringing in all these guys, and they're all amazing. Omar Balu is amazing. Miles Rice is amazing. You've got Luke Goody is amazing. You've got a lot of amazing players that you've brought in via the transfer portal, and you have a good core of guys who are staying for their fifth year, and Malik Renew, and all types of talent on that regard. And Mackenzie Mbaka was a big get too. But the reason the Big Ten is the most interesting conference is because I don't even know who's going to be good because these teams are entirely mixed up, messed up, and confused. Then the reason I think Purdue ends up winning is because they actually returned the most out of any team in the Big Ten. Like you said, Braden Smith's back, Fletcher Lawyer's back, Trey Kaufman Wren. Now, the guy I think that they need to step up is Miles Colvin. If Miles Colvin takes the jump, I think he can. Purdue is probably going to end up almost right back where they were. And like I said, it feels weird saying that Purdue is the most consistent team, given that they've lost the two-time Player of the Year and their enforcer in Mason Gillis to the Duke Blue Devils. But I mean, I look at the other teams around. Indiana added a lot of transfers. The new teams in the conference, Eric Musselman's basically got a whole different roster at USC. They could be good. They could fail epically. UCLA, probably the third best team on paper in that conference. They could be good. They could fail epically. Dusty May brought in a whole new roster to the Michigan Wolverines. Are they good? Will they gel? Ohio State's the exact same way. And then you've got a team like Rutgers, who we're going to talk about a little bit more later, where it's like they've got depth, they've got some young guys, but does that work together? We don't know. That's why Indiana and Purdue are the top two teams in the Big Ten, is because they bring back cores of guys who know how to win. It's just that Purdue brings back a little bit more production and maybe even a lot more production. I'm forgetting the exact numbers off the top of my head. But that's why they're number one to me, is because they bring back consistent production that's proved itself. While Indiana, even though they do bring back the production and probably have a more pure, raw, talented roster, needs to figure out how all these guys are going to work together and figure out what style of basketball Mike Woodson wants to play. But the Big Ten is the most interesting conference in college basketball because I could see an argument for like six different teams catching fire and ending up on top of the conference when all is said and done. Ryan, oh my gosh, this is going to be a very boring episode because Ryan also makes it unanimous saying this is cap. IU will be very good this season because of how good their offseason was, which is weird to talk about in college basketball. But I think there will be a different different Big Ten team that wins a conference and not Indiana. Well, that's also because I still think he's mad that they ducked us in football. I'm kidding. That was totally IU's decision. But yeah, so that's what Ryan thinks. And so now, speaking of Louisville and other forms of sports, we're going to cross the river and ask the question that everyone wants to hear the answer to. Is the UK versus U of L rivalry back
Hold
on?
on. Did you skip? I think you skipped one because we had one before that.
Maybe I intentionally did that now that I look at the question.
That's fine. Okay, then yes, do you, bud?
Is the ACC's Dukes to lose? I think I know what Les is going to say. So let's just get the Cooper flag talk out of the way, Les. Is that cap or no cap?
Well, obviously it's no cap for me. I'm actually going to surprise you because I'm not going to say a ton about my Blue Devils to avoid the podcast jinx that I put on them last year. I don't need to say anything else. I think listeners of this podcast know I've talked about Duke and especially Cooper Flag ad nauseum over the summer. On paper, this team has everything: shooting, perimeter defense, size. I mean, they don't have a scholarship player under 6'5". They have their return backcourt coming back. Kaman Malowich, Cooper Flag is the number one rated prospect in next year's NBA draft, but Kaman Malowich is also a top 10 prospect. Khan Kneppel is making headways in the practice. A lot of scouts are loving what they're seeing from him. Duke could be really good. Duke has the potential to be really good this year, and I'm not going to deny that. Basically, it'll come down to youth and chemistry as how good they do end up becoming. But yeah, I think from a preseason standpoint, yeah, the ACC is Duke's to lose.
I know I'm putting on the cap, but don't worry, this is actually a no cap. I just wanted to wear the Murray State hat.
Fair enough.
It is Duke's to lose, but it much like last year with North Carolina. I don't think it'll be as easy as people think it is. The ACC has been kind of going through a rough patch.
Hmm.
And honestly, I don't think North Carolina is Duke's biggest threat. I know that's shocking to say, but they've just lost so much from losing Armando Bacot and Cormac Ryan, Harrison Ingram, et cetera, et cetera. I know Elliot Kadu is very good, and I know that RJ Davis is back, but I think they've got some questions, and I don't think they're the team that's going to scare Duke the most if Duke wants to win the ACC championship. There are two teams that I think that could put a little bit of the fear of God into Duke because of what they've gotten. The first one's a bit of a surprise. It's Wake Forest.
Hmm.
I say Wake Forest because they've got some veteran guards. They've got Hunter Salas and they've got Cam Hildreth, who averaged 13 points a game, and they have a 7'1" center by the name of Efton Reed, who averaged 9.6. They've got some veterans on that team and some good guards who, they could get in the way, harass that Duke offense, and maybe won't be as daunted by all the 5-star recruits and everything like that. I took off my hat. All the 5-star recruits and everything like that when they play Duke. And the other one is Virginia. I know Virginia had a down season last year. They gave us nothing in the NCAA tournament. Let's be honest, that was horrible. But Tony Bennett and Isaac McNeely, they're going to figure it out. They're going to figure out that pack line defense, and they're just going to do Virginia basketball. And you know what that means, which means boring pack line defenses that somehow always work. And
Yeah.
I don't know why. It's just like I don't feel like Virginia would have two bad seasons like that back to back to back. So I think that Virginia has something up their sleeve. It may be sneaky, but I would be surprised if Virginia doesn't improve. And I'm really high on Wake Forest and what Steve Forbes is doing there. And of course, you've got to watch out for guys like you got to watch out for Pittsburgh. They lost Bud Carrington. They could be good. They have Ishmael Leggett ready to go. But yeah, the ACC is not where it needs to be. And of course, there's always the team we're going to talk about next, once after we read Ryan's take here, that's going to possibly make some noise in the conference. But yeah, it's Duke's to lose. I think Duke has the deepest, most talented roster. They added guys, they added transcendental freshmen. They added great guys in the portal to help those freshmen. But,
Shout out to Sion James. Shout
yes,
out to Sion James.
it's never easy, though, as you think, to win a conference championship. And I think Wake Forest, Virginia, and obviously to some extent North Carolina are all in the picture to give them at least a run for their money. When we asked Ryan what he had to say about this, he said that hold on, no cap. He agrees because he doesn't see many ACC teams that will contend with Duke, but does worry about their youth. But they're definitely a team to look out for. Couldn't have said it better myself. And speaking of the ACC and other teams within it, that brings us to the question I was going to ask because I was trying to skip that one, which is the UK versus U of L rivalry back on track? Les, is that cap or no cap?
It's no cap, and I have to give Mark Pope and Matt Kelsey a ton of credit here. They came in and totally John Calipari'd this shit. I met with the team. There is no team, and they basically went out and through the transfer portal built teams from the ground up, and they built pretty solid teams. I mean, I've been watching Louisville's exhibition games, and they look really good, way ahead of schedule. I mean, I get it. You got to take those with a grain of salt because of who they're playing, but still look like a much more well-rounded unit than they have in years past. Kentucky, same thing. Mark Pope and Pat Kelsey deserve a lot of credit from me for coming in and establishing an energy with not only the team but the fan base that's been missing the last several years. And then on Mark Pope's side, they come in and get someone like Jackson Robinson that could lead the team year one. Lamont Butler, who is a very good defensive guard, hit one of the bigger shots in college basketball over the last several years, or that put San Diego State in the championship game a couple years ago. Remind me the big guy's name. Was it Amari Williams, I want to say?
Yes.
It's Amari Williams. Yes, Amari Williams, very good defensive center. Yeah, both of these teams. Also correct. Also help me out here. Who's the Kashawn Pryor? Kashawn Pryor. I like that move for Louisville as well. and then Terrence Edwards Jr. for U of L. They added some very good pieces I think could really help the Cards this year. But yeah, I mean, I think both teams are having energy about them that has been missing the last several years. And all I'm going to say to finish up my take is that December 14th is going to be a lot of fun. The UK U of L rivalry is officially back. So congratulations, Cards and Cats fans.
The Kentucky Colonels hat is on. Shout out,
Throwback.
shout out to the ABA. But this is also no cap whatsoever. I mean, for all the reasons you said, you've got two guys who have built basically from nothing to the transfer portal, and you've got a former player involved too, who went to Kentucky, won a championship at Kentucky, and Pat Kelsey, who's got like massive amounts of intensity. It's amazing how intense and focused that guy is. So yeah, this rivalry is back, and it's probably even better than it's been even during the, especially since Patino left U of L. Now I would even say since Calipari left. Unless I would like to point out that
Mm-hmm.
Louisville cannot take those exhibition games for granted, considering they lost two of them over the
100%.
past few seasons.
100%.
Nobody wants to get Lenore Ryan again. Let's be honest about that.
Facts.
Facts. But Kenny Payne's gone. Pat Kelsey's in. He's had an amazing transfer portal class. Kentucky, what I love about them is that people are complaining for some reason that they're not getting like the 5-star recruits, which is exactly what they didn't, which is exactly what they hated on John Calipari for. But
Mm.
the point being, Kentucky went out and got a lot of veteran defensive guys too. This is going to be unlike any Kentucky team we've seen.
If I may, Matt, may
Okay,
I
go ahead.
interject? Yeah, if I may, I want to say that Kentucky is getting 5-star recruits, maybe not this year, but the year after with Malachi Moreno and Jasper Johnson. I think that's worth pointing out that maybe this is the year where they bring in those defensive veteran guys that you spoke about, but then next year is when they really start establishing the recruiting, lineage.
And it'll be really interesting to see how that works. I think
Right.
too, because you're right. This year might be a little bit of a different year for Kentucky. They may not have as high of a seed going in, but I would be surprised. Nay, I would be shocked if they don't go further in the NCAA tournament this year if they did than they did last year. And I know they were only in there for one game, but I think that this team, if they play up to their potential with the depth and defensive guys they've got, could easily make the Sweet 16. But now that we're done talking about Kentucky, oh, Ryan's take. Whoops.
Yeah.
Sorry, Ryan. I almost
Don't
forgot you.
forget about Ryan though.
I can only imagine what Ryan will say about like Kentucky. No cap. It will be back, but it'll obviously look a lot different without Cal and the whole rosters of Louisville and Kentucky looking so much different. I think it's honestly going to go back to being competitive, which is true, which will make it all the more fun to watch. So we all agree on this one too that it's no cap. It's going to be really interesting to see. And now we can move on to the guy who left that Kentucky job and moved over to the Fayetteville metropolitan area, which is actually very nice. They have a Whataburger there, which is great. Which is the question now becomes: is Arkansas now the recruiting hotspot?
I'm gonna half cap this.
Uh oh,
Infamous half
the
cap.
dreaded half cap.
And what inspired this question, was that interview that DeMarcus Cousins was in talking about the realistic expectations of Calipari University. And of course, he goes on to say Arkansas will now be the hot spot. Arkansas will now be the team that College Game Day goes to basically every weekend. And I'm going to chime into that and say half cap because I think Arkansas will be a recruiting hotspot, but it will not be the recruiting hotspot because you still have to, in the recruiting cycle, you still got to worry about Duke. They're not going anywhere. UConn's making a lot of noise in the recruiting cycle in these last couple of years, and their success on the court is, to be attributed to that. Kansas is always a threat in the recruiting cycle as well. And every year, because since the NIL era, it's created a whole different world when it comes to recruiting because every year a different team could just dig into that NIL bag and have a great recruiting cycle. And yeah, so I think Arkansas will be a recruiting hotspot, but they will not be the recruiting hotspot.
This question came down to the wording for me, and I totally agree that that is some cap right there. I'm wearing the cap from the other school in Lexington, Kentucky, Transylvania. Go Pioneers! I love your bat. And I'm going to say that that is some cap, though, on behalf of Arkansas and Kentucky, or Arkansas, just for the reason you said, Les. I mean, everybody has NIL now. There are no under the table deals. There are no whatevers. It's any man's market. Anybody can do whatever they want, get the players they want, have them in, give them whatever NIL they want. And while Arkansas has a lot of that because of the Tyson Industries, because of the people in the area, the Waltons and all that, it's not the only show in town. It's and there are always going to be players who just go, I don't like the way Arkansas feels, even if John Calipari's great. I'm going to go to Duke, or I'm going to go to Indiana, or I'm going to go to Louisville, or I'm going to go to Purdue, just because I feel like I fit in there better. So I don't think they're the hotspot right now because they did miss out on some guys and have missed out on some guys right now going forward. So, that's one of the beautiful things about NIL to an extent. I know we're having qualms with it right now because of what's happening at like UNLV and stuff, is that it turns every school into a recruiting hotspot if you just get hot at the right time and if you find the right donor. So I'm going to say that that is cap simply because in this new market, it's a competitive landscape where you're trying to get the best candidates for your job, and that's just how it is. So while Arkansas is one of those top programs because of their coach and because of their NIL, it's just not the only one. It's not the place. It's not the mecca. And
Yeah,
of course, Ryan agrees with us. He says that that's cap. He said it's a recruiting hotspot, but not the recruiting hotspot, and it's certainly not the only one. There
I
are
did
other.
not copy off Ryan's response. I do want to point that out.
Well, I mean, there's really not much you can say about this. We all have
Right.
basically the same thing, which is now anyone can go anywhere they want. So Ryan says that that is cap as well, and there will be other hotspots for recruiting. Speaking of hotspots for recruiting, there is one school that has also tapped into that potential. We mentioned them a little bit earlier, a team that not many people think of, the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. Now, they have two very exciting freshmen, which I know Les is very excited about. And now, which poses the question of Rutgers. Will Rutgers be must watch television this year, Les? Cap or no cap?
As a recruiting fan, this is absolutely no cap to me. The freshman duo of Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper will be must see TV. Two five-star top five recruits who are projected top 10 picks in the 2025 NBA draft. I mean, what's not to love about that? Bailey is one of the recruits with the highest upside as a wing scorer, but dude, let me tell you, Dylan Harper is an absolute dog. He is one of the best combo guard scorers to come out of that New Jersey area, and you and I both know the lineage that area has produced in the basketball world. So that's saying a whole lot. To me, he's the second best recruit coming out of high school. Only behind Cooper Flag. And if it weren't for Cooper Flag, he'd be number one. Has an absolute alpha dog mentality, and I absolutely love watching this kid play. And he by himself could make Rutgers must see TV. But then you add Ace Bailey to go along with that, they're gonna be so much fun to watch.
They really are. Which is why, even though I'm putting on the Hanover College cap here, it's actually no cap whatsoever. And I know people are going to be focusing on Harper and Bailey, but what I also love about Rutgers is they've got a little bit of depth they can throw around too. The biggest thing that they had last year was Jeremiah Williams coming on at the end of the year because that gives them another really good guard. Jamichael Davis, he's coming back. He's going to take a big step up. And then you add in a lot of good transfers like Tyson Acuff from Eastern Michigan. You've got Zach Martini from Princeton, Merrimack's transfer, Jordan DeCack. I'm reading off my notes here. And Pete, and a guy who only averaged 3 points last year but could still do some work. And San Diego transfer PJ Hayes. And you throw in Lathan Somerville. I mean, he could be okay. He'll be another freshman. But yeah, Rutgers has some depth. They're establishing a great culture under Steve Peichel. They're going to be just fine going forward, and they're going to be exciting television to watch. So yes, that's no cap on Rutgers at all. I love the way they've constructed a roster. I love how they've turned the rack into a thing and not a laughing stock. And I just like Steve Peichel. I think it's because he looks like Mr. Carlson from WKRP in Cincinnati. And of course, Ryan agrees with us. He says that Rutgers will be a very tough team this year with new freshmen Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper. They will be a lot of fun to watch in the Big Ten. But now it's time for the. I don't even know why we ask this question every year, Les, because we know what the answer is. And I'm not even going to say anything about it, which has the transfer portal killed recruiting?
As the quote unquote self proclaimed recruiting expert on this show, this is absolute cap. And I think what the transfer portal has proven across not only college basketball, but college football as well, is that it's great for adding pieces. But when it comes to building the foundation of your team, you still get that from the recruiting cycle. Not to mention, you have an opportunity to recruit a stud five-star, like a Cooper Flag, like a Dylan Harper, like a VJ Edgecombe. What are you going to say? No? Like, no, we don't want you here. Like you
Get lost.
capping out your ass, you think that. Oh, I forgot. Speaking of cap, I forgot to put the hat on. But yeah, this is absolute cap to me. Recruiting will always have a business in collegiate sports, and that's just the way it is and the way it always will be.
Yeah, this is massive cap. I don't even know what to say. I mean, we've been told about the death of college sports for eons and eons and eons because of this stuff. And if anything, it just makes it more exciting because you have a more fun off season. And that's all I'm going to say about it. Because, like
Facts.
you said, people get proven all the time that transfer portal is not the best way to build a team. Ryan agrees with us. He says no cap because there are some players that will stay on the same team, but there's so much movement in college basketball that I don't know how much recruiting would matter if you could just get a team from a transfer portal. Which, some teams do it, some teams don't. So, that's the fun part about this. And now it's time for a question that I think we've hit on a couple times.
Was that our first disagreement
Oh, I think
between?
that was.
Wow, that's got
I
to be a
just
record.
read.
Eight questions in, we had our first disagreement.
And even then, it's just a philosophical thing.
Right.
And so now comes our ninth question. Will the SEC challenge the Big 12 for best conference? Les, is that cap or no cap?
Well, that's no cap, and I think this really got Bean's attention because now he's perked up for this. So maybe he has some dog in the fight here. No pun intended. But yeah, it's no cap to me because they got 9 teams in the preseason top 25. Alabama is one of the best teams in the country in the preseason. Auburn, Tennessee, Texas A&M have legitimate chances to battle Alabama for the conference crown. Arkansas is rejuvenated under Calipari University. Texas and Oklahoma can come in and through the realignment, and they add some depth to that as well. Kentucky has something brewing in the Pope era. Ole Miss and Florida will be competitive. You can argue that the Big 12 is more top heavy with 5 teams in the top 10. So it is 5 teams in the top 10. Sorry, I should have just looked at my notes. But you can argue depth for the SEC. And you go also shout out to Texas. I think they could have a really underrated season, bringing in some of the guys that they've brought through the transfer portal, like Tremont Marks and guys. And, they brought in an absolute bucket with Trey Johnson through the recruiting cycle. I think they could have a sneaky good season, in their first season in the SEC. Not as SEC dominant as the football team, I will say that much, but still a good season nonetheless. But yes, this is no cap to me.
Yeah, I'm putting on the cap, but this is another no cap. I mean, the SEC has done is greatly improved from last season. Even I think South Carolina is going to continue to grow too. Even those bottom tier teams are going to continue to grow. 'Cause, I mean, heck, even Vanderbilt still gets the occasional top 50 prospect, so it's hard to knock them down. Whereas the bottom part of the Big 12, it still needs rebuild. It needs to get there. So this is no cap. The SEC will challenge the Big 12. I still think the top heaviness of the Big 12 propels them a little bit more forward just because of the guys they've got. And Ryan would agree with, he says no cap. He thinks the SEC for sure challenges the Big 12 for the best conference with the additions of Texas and Oklahoma and how overall good the conference actually is. So, Les, I'm going to do this last one a little bit different because I think I'll end up closing out the show with it. I'm going to read Ryan's response before I give mine because, as you know, I have a list for this question,
Fair
which is
enough.
sillily phrased, but Gonzaga is the only non-powered six team worth talking about this year. Les, is that cap or no cap?
Yeah, that's cap because there's teams outside of the Power Four that are good every year. That we always end up having that Cinderella team come tournament time that even if people aren't talking about during the regular season, they make noise in the tournament. So that's always worth talking about. But I do want to point out how good I do think Gonzaga could be because you have Ryan Nimhard coming back, Michael Iai coming back, Dusty Stromer coming back.
Don't you forget.
Nolan Hickman coming back, Graham Ike.
There you
Um,
go.
yeah, I would say yeah. I'm going to throw in Graham Ike, and of course they got Khalif Battle from Arkansas transferring in. So yeah, Gonzaga. I do want to point out is going to be really good, but no, to say the only non-power forward team talking about to be talked about is complete cap to me. There's 2 good teams every year.
Brian agrees. No cap. I'm honestly going to say that there will be so many good teams to talk about that will overshadow other teams. A lot of the best non-power six teams lost some quality transfers to the power conferences. And of course, I think this is cap if you watch the show for any period of time whatsoever. So I'm going to go ahead and give you your money's worth and close out with six teams that you're going to want to watch really closely this year. We're going to start in the Missouri Valley Conference, home of the Evansville Purple Aces, with Bradley. Bradley is going to be this year's Indiana State. I'm telling you now. Zach Montgomery is a fantastic player, and if you don't know who Duke Dean is, you need
Hmm.
to start looking it up now because that guy, if he gets into March Madness, is going to become a breakout player. Absolutely is amazing roster at Bradley right now. Bradley is going to make some noise this season. Princeton, they made the Sweet 16 last year. They lost a lot of guys, but they got Xavier Lee and Caden Pierce to come back. Those guys are dynamic scorers. They're going to make some noise too. Charleston, Louisville stole their coach, but not their big guy. Ante Brozic is back, and they add Lazar Djokovic from not Clemson, from Xavier University. They've got some size, they've got some power. They're going to be fun to watch. Loyola Chicago, don't forget about them. Top 50 recruiting class to pair with Jalen Deloach, a former Georgia player. That's going to be a very scary team. Arkansas State, they're going to win the Sun Belt. Be aware of them. They've got Kobe Julian and Isaiah Nelson. That's a great 1-2 punch. And if they get into March Madness, they're going to make a lot of noise too. And finally, we forgot about some of these guys. We forgot about Josh Schertz, last year's darling. After the run to the tournament came up a little bit short, made it to the NIT championship game, didn't go to Louisville, didn't go to Michigan, instead went to the St. Louis Billikens, fun name. But he has a really good roster going in there with Robbie Havila. Kobe Johnson transfers in from West Virginia. AJ Casey comes in from Miami. And they even got a couple guys that come back, most notably Larry Hughes II. And I know that people are still going to remember Larry Nerd and all that stuff and the fun times at Indiana State. But this St. Louis team in the Atlantic 10 looks really good. And I think that that if they mesh together well with Josh Schertz's style, they can easily win that conference and have a really, really good season. And like when we get to March, a team with that three pieces that can get stuff done, maybe more, is a dangerous team. And also, shout out to George Mason. Be on the lookout for them. They're going to have a really good roster too.
I think that wraps it up. Shout out to mid-major Matt on that final segment of the 2024-2025 Less is More Sports Cap or No Cap College Basketball Edition.
Ooh, getting hot in here.
It's been hot for me the whole time, but
Well, I know.
I think that's just the fever talking.
Well, that's
But
just me rattling off all those mid majors. But like Les said, that concludes our 2024 through 2025 men's basketball cap or no cap edition. If you like this episode, be sure to like and subscribe to the Less is More Sports Talk podcast, whether that be on YouTube, Spotify, or even following Les on TikTok at BeansDad018. He's got some weird college football thing where I almost want to troll him with the 1902 Yale Bulldogs, but I resist. I resist. But anyway, if you enjoy this podcast, Spotify, YouTube Shorts, even, and TikTok are the best ways to follow along with us and watch out for new episodes and new themes we've got coming up real soon. I predict that our next episode probably will be Les and I drafting college basketball's best players, but that's not confirmed yet. I'm just going on a premonition. But we're going to have fun with that whenever the time comes. So thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe, and we will see you guys and you all next time on the Less is More Sports Talk podcast. Have a great day.
have a